My son screamed in horror as my daughter-in-law Chloe stood there, her arm still extended after throwing a glass of wine in my face. "You useless old hag. When I ask you for more wine, you obey," she shouted, staggering drunkenly in my dining room. In that moment, something inside me broke. As a retired judge, I knew the law very well, and I knew exactly how to use it to show her who really called the shots in this house. But before we continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. The dinner had started peacefully enough. It was just another one of the Friday dinners I had been preparing since my son, Ethan, and Chloe moved into my house 6 months ago. The story was always the same. They were saving up to buy their own place. They just needed a little time. 6 months later, they were still here. I prepared a pot roast that took hours in the oven. The table was set with my best china. The crystal glasses I inherited from my grandmother gleamed under the light of the chandelier. For me, these little formalities mattered. After 30 years as a criminal court judge, routine and order were what kept me grounded. Chloe arrived already on edge. She walked through the front door at 7:30, tossed her purse onto the sofa, and went straight to the wet bar in the corner of the living room. She poured herself a generous glass of red wine while complaining about work. "That idiot boss of mine thinks he can keep pushing me around. He made me redo the entire report because, according to him, it was missing critical details." She downed the glass in 3 gulps and filled another before even sitting down at the table. Ethan shot me an apologetic look as he helped bring the dishes to the table. My son had always been like this, trying to please everyone, avoiding confrontation at any cost. During dinner, I tried to maintain a civilized conversation, asking about Ethan's work at the veterinary clinic, commenting on the new book I was reading, anything to dilute the growing tension Chloe brought with her. But every time we spoke, Chloe would interrupt with some cynical remark or roll her eyes, like a moody teenager and not a 32-year-old woman. And with each interruption, she drank more wine. By the 3rd bottle, I decided that was enough. When Chloe extended her empty glass in my direction, as if I were a waitress waiting to serve her, I simply said, "I think you've had enough to drink for tonight, Chloe." She froze, the glass still lifted in the air, her eyes fixed on me, as if she couldn't believe what she had heard. "What?" "I said you've had enough to drink. This is my house, and I will not allow you to get drunk like this at my table." It was like lighting a fuse. Her face turned red, not just from the wine, but from a sudden rage that seemed to have been there, bubbling under the surface for months. "Your house?" She laughed, a bitter sound that cut through the air. "Just because we have to live in this old museum with you doesn't mean you can treat us like children." Ethan touched her arm. "Chloe, please." Chloe shoved his hand away. "No, Ethan, I'm tired of this. Your mother looks at us like we're intruders, as if we're not worthy of stepping on her precious hardwood floors." She turned to me. "You know what your problem is? You can't accept that you're not the powerful Judge Eleanor Vance anymore. Now you're just a lonely, retired old woman who needs to control everything and everyone around her to feel important." I remained calm. Years on the bench taught me not to show a reaction when provoked. If that's how you feel, maybe it's time you found another place to live. "Mom," Chloe smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Servants shouldn't talk back to their masters." She extended the glass again. "Now, more wine." "No." That was all I needed to say. In a movement too fast for me to react, Chloe threw the glass directly at my face. The crystal hit my right temple and shattered. I felt the sharp pain of the impact, then the warm trickle of blood running down the side of my face. My son screamed. Chloe just stood there, breathing heavily, almost surprised by her own action, but showing no remorse. I brought my hand to my temple and looked at my fingers, now stained red. The silence in the room was deafening. 30 years of sending criminals to prison, and now I was bleeding at my own dining room table. "Ethan," I said, with a calmness I did not feel, "take your wife to her room, now." Ethan hurried to pull Chloe away, who still seemed stunned by what she had done. I heard their footsteps going up the stairs, the bedroom door slamming shut. I went to the bathroom and examined the cut in the mirror. It wasn't deep, but it would bleed a lot, as head wounds often do. As I cleaned the wound with cold water, My thoughts organized themselves like a prosecutor preparing a case. I documented everything with my phone. I photographed the cut, the blood stain on my white blouse, the shards of glass on the dining room floor. I collected every fragment and placed it in a plastic bag. Evidence. 30 years in the justice system taught me that evidence is everything. I couldn't sleep that night. Sitting in my home office, with an ice pack against my temple, I began to outline my plan. Not for revenge. Revenge is emotional, impulsive. What I needed was justice. I needed to protect my son and my home. At 6 in the morning, with the wound already forming a purplish-blue bruise, I picked up the phone. Chicago Police Department. How can I help you? I want to report an assault. The officer arrived at 7:30 in the morning, just as the morning sun began to filter through the blinds. Chloe and Ethan were still asleep, exhausted after the previous night's explosion. I opened the door and the police officer, a middle-aged man with graying temples, introduced himself. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Officer Miller. I received a call about an assault." I invited him in and led him to the dining room, where the pieces of glass were still preserved in a corner, marked with small numbered labels I had prepared during my sleepless night. "It happened right here," I explained, keeping my voice low so as not to wake the two upstairs. "My daughter-in-law threw this glass at my face when I refused to serve her more wine. She had already had far too much to drink. I showed him the photos on my phone, the cut on my temple, the blood on my blouse. The officer noted everything with a professional, non-judgmental expression. "Is the assailant still on the premises?" "Yes, sleeping upstairs with my son. Do you wish to press charges?" I hesitated for only a second, thinking of Ethan, but then I remembered the look in Chloe's eyes as she threw the glass, that certainty that she could assault me in my own home and get away with it. "Yes, officer. I want to press formal charges." We sat at the kitchen table while he filled out the police report. The assailant's full name, our relationship, a detailed description of what happened. I provided the information in the same tone I used to deliver sentences. Clear, precise, with no visible emotion. We were just finishing up when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, his eyes puffy with sleep, and his confusion turned to horror when he saw the police officer. "Mom? What's going on?" Before I could answer, Chloe appeared behind him, also confused, but her face quickly changed to anger when she saw my bruised temple and the officer sitting at the table. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. The officer stood up. "Mrs. Chloe Thompson? I'm here to investigate a report of assault that occurred at this residence last night." Andre looked at me, incredulous. "You called the police? On Chloe?" "She assaulted me, Ethan. She threw a glass at my face and cut me." I kept my voice firm, without remorse. "It was an accident. She was drunk," Ethan protested, desperate. "Being intoxicated is not a valid defense for physical assault, sir," the officer commented, his tone professional but firm. Chloe took a step forward, her fists clenched. "You can't be serious. This is ridiculous." "It was a family argument." "A family argument that resulted in bodily injury," I replied calmly. "And in my own home." The officer addressed Chloe. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to come with me to the police station to give a statement." "What?" she screamed. "You're going to arrest me over a broken glass?" "At this moment, I am only requesting that you give a statement. Depending on the established facts, you could be charged with assault and battery." Ethan was crying now, alternating pleading looks between me and the officer. "Please, Mom, don't do this. We can solve this as a family." I looked at my son, feeling a pang of pain that had nothing to do with the cut on my temple. "Ethan, we've been trying to solve it as a family for 6 months. Last night, Chloe crossed a line." The officer asked Chloe to get dressed appropriately to accompany him. She stomped up the stairs. Ethan followed right behind, begging her to calm down. I was left alone with the officer for a few minutes. He looked at me with an expression I recognized, the kind of look veteran cops give when they're trying to understand the family dynamics behind an incident. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to go through with this? Family problems can sometimes be—" "Officer," I interrupted politely. "I worked for 30 years as a criminal court judge. I know exactly what I'm doing and what the legal consequences will be." He seemed surprised. Then he nodded with a new respect in his eyes. Chloe came down the stairs, now dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Ethan followed her, still crying silently. "This isn't over," Chloe said as she passed me. "You're going to regret doing this." The officer warned her not to make threats, which only fueled her anger. As he escorted her outside, Ethan turned to me, his eyes red from crying. "How could you do this? She's my wife." "And I am your mother," I replied simply. "And this is my house." The front door closed, and silence once again filled the house. Ethan stared at me for a few seconds, as if he didn't recognize me, before running up the stairs. I heard the bedroom door slam shut. I sat down in the living room armchair, suddenly exhausted. The bruise was throbbing, but the physical pain was almost a relief compared to the pain of seeing Ethan's face. Still, I didn't regret it. Years on the bench taught me that justice doesn't always seem fair in the moment it's applied. 2 hours later, Ethan came downstairs with a backpack. His face was determined, but his eyes were still swollen. "I'm going to get Chloe from the police station, and we're going to stay at Megan's place until we figure things out." Megan was a friend of theirs who lived in a tiny apartment downtown. It wasn't a permanent solution, and we both knew it. "Ethan," I began, trying to keep my voice gentle, "you don't have to leave. This is your house too." He laughed, a humorless sound. "This house stopped being mine the moment you decided to call the cops on my wife." "She assaulted me, Ethan, at my own dinner table. She was drunk, and she lost her head. People make mistakes. And people need to answer for their mistakes," I replied, my voice now firmer, "especially when those mistakes involve physical violence." Ethan shook his head. "It's always been this way. The unbending judge, the law above everything, even your own son." That hurt more than the cut on my temple, but I didn't let it show. "It's because I love you that I'm doing this, Ethan. Chloe is abusive, and you're trapped in that relationship." "Don't you dare analyze my marriage," he shouted. "You've always hated Chloe. You've always thought I deserved better." "And you do," I said quietly. "You deserve someone who respects you, and who respects your family." Ethan grabbed the car keys from the coffee table. "I'm going to get my wife. Then we'll be back to pick up the rest of our things." When the door closed behind him, I let out a long, tired sigh. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the peaceful silence I valued so much. It was a heavy silence, laden with consequences. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, alternating between doubt and certainty. Had I done the right thing? Had I lost my son forever? The questions swirled in my mind as I tried to read, tried to eat, tried to distract myself. That evening, the phone rang. It was Ethan. "We're at Megan's. Chloe was released with a summons to appear for a hearing next week." His voice was cold, distant. "We'll be by tomorrow to get our things." "Ethan, you don't have to. I've already made my decision, Mother. I choose to stand by my wife." After he hung up, I sat down at my office desk and opened a new folder on the computer. I named it Case File, Chloe. Inside, I created documents to log every stage of the process, every decision made, every piece of evidence collected. For 30 years, I built cases against all types of criminals. Now, I was building a case to save my son from a toxic marriage, even if, for the moment, he hated me for it. The next morning, as I waited for Ethan and Chloe to arrive to pick up their things, I called an old friend. Arthur and I had worked together for years, he as a detective and I as a judge. Retired longer than I was, he now ran a small private investigation agency. "Eleanor, how long has it been?" His deep voice brought me instant comfort. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need your help, Arthur. It's a delicate matter." I explained the situation, the assault, the police report, the rift with Ethan. "I need to know more about Chloe. I have a bad feeling about their finances, about how they're really living." Arthur didn't ask unnecessary questions. "Send me her information. I'll look into it discreetly." An hour later, I parked my car 2 blocks from the house and waited. I didn't want to be present when they came to collect their belongings. A direct confrontation would only make things worse right now. From my vantage point, I saw Ethan's car pull up. He and Chloe went into the house using the key Ethan still had. I watched the house for almost 2 hours, occasionally seeing one of them in a window, carrying boxes, moving quickly. When they finally came out, the car was visibly packed. Ethan looked at the house one last time before getting into the vehicle. Even from a distance, I could see he was crying. Chloe, on the other hand, looked irritated, gesturing as she said something I couldn't hear. I waited another 20 minutes before going back home. Their absence was almost physical empty spaces where objects used to be, silences where conversations used to be. The guest room they had occupied was partially empty. They left the furniture, obviously, but all personal items were gone. In the closet, I noticed one of my pieces of jewelry was missing a gold brooch that had belonged to my mother. Ethan knew how much I valued it. Was it an oversight or a small act of revenge? I chose to believe the former. The following days were filled with an oppressive silence. Ethan didn't call, didn't answer my texts. I tried to respect his space, but every day without news was a small torture. On Wednesday, I received the first report from Arthur. Sitting in my office, I opened the email attachment with apprehension. The findings were worse than I had imagined. Chloe had been fired from her job 3 months earlier. She wasn't just having trouble with her boss, as she claimed at dinner. She was unemployed, hiding it from everyone, including Ethan. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Chloe had 5 credit cards, all maxed out, totaling a debt of nearly $50,000. Worse, 2 of those cards were in Ethan's name, likely opened with a power of attorney or by using his information without his knowledge. The report also showed something that genuinely alarmed me. 3 significant withdrawals from Ethan's retirement account in the last 2 months, totaling $25,000. To make those withdrawals, Chloe would have needed access to Ethan's passwords or forged his signature. There was more. Small complaints from stores about bounced checks, an eviction notice from a previous apartment they had never mentioned, and, most disturbingly, conversations captured on social media where Chloe talked with friends about inheriting a house soon when the old hag finally croaks. The old hag. Me. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a case of an explosive temper or a disrespectful daughter-in-law. It was a systematic scheme. Chloe was financially sinking my son while planning a future built on my death. I printed the entire report and filed it in a secure folder. I needed more. I needed to understand the full extent of the situation before confronting Ethan with these discoveries. I called Arthur again. I need you to keep digging, especially into the retirement account withdrawals. If you can get concrete proof that Chloe acted without Ethan's authorization, we could be talking about financial crimes. I'm on it, Arthur replied. And Eleanor, be careful. If this woman is financially desperate and thinks she can inherit something from you, well, he didn't need to finish the sentence. 30 years in the criminal justice system taught me that money is one of the most powerful motivators for desperate acts. That night, I changed the locks on the house, a necessary precaution. The following week brought the preliminary hearing for the assault. I attended the courthouse where I had worked for decades, this time as a victim. It was strange to sit on the other side, to see former colleagues greet me with concerned expressions, to hear whispers in the hallways. Chloe arrived with her lawyer, a young man in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he was fresh out of law school. Ethan wasn't with her, which surprised me. I had expected my son to be there to support his wife. The judge was a competent woman I knew superficially from my last years before retirement. She recognized me immediately, nodding discreetly in my direction. The proceeding was brief and to the point. The prosecutor presented the charges of misdemeanor assault. Chloe's lawyer argued it was an isolated incident, provoked by stress and alcohol consumption, with no intent to cause harm. Your Honor, he said, my client has no criminal record and is deeply remorseful for what happened. We request that an alternative measure to jail time be considered, such as community service. When it was my turn to speak, I stood with the posture I had maintained for decades in these very rooms. Your Honor, I am not seeking revenge or severe punishment. I am seeking justice and, primarily, protection. The assault occurred in my own home, at my own table, by someone I was sheltering out of kindness. I respectfully request that, in addition to any punitive measures the court deems appropriate, a restraining order be issued preventing the defendant from approaching my residence. I saw Chloe's face pale. A restraining order would mean she couldn't return to my house, the house where she and Ethan were living, the house she apparently hoped to inherit. The judge considered for a few moments before announcing her decision. Given the nature of the incident and the relationship between the parties, I hereby order the defendant to complete 6 months of community service and mandatory participation in an anger management program. Additionally, I am issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting the defendant from coming within 300 feet of the victim's residence and person for a period of 90 days, after which the situation will be reevaluated. Chloe's lawyer tried to protest, arguing that the restraining order was excessive given the family context, but the judge was firm. Domestic violence is no less serious because it occurs between family members, counselor. On the contrary, as I left the courtroom, I noticed Ethan sitting on the back bench. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, quickly getting up to meet Chloe in the hallway. I wanted to approach him, to explain why I was doing all this, to tell him I had discovered disturbing things, but the moment wasn't right. Ethan wasn't ready to listen. I returned home and added the hearing transcript and a copy of the restraining order to my case file. Chloe. The folder was getting thicker, both literally and metaphorically. 2 days later, I received an unexpected call. It was Ethan. Mom. His voice sounded exhausted, almost unrecognizable. We need to talk. We agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop, far from both my house and the friend's apartment where they were staying. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table in the corner where we could have some privacy. Ethan walked in right on time. He was thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes that he couldn't quite hide. He was wearing a turtleneck sweater despite the heat of the day, something that immediately set off my internal alarms. Are you okay? I'm dealing, he replied, avoiding my gaze as he picked up the menu. We ordered coffee, black for me, with milk for him, as always. When the waitress walked away, we sat in an uncomfortable silence, neither of us knowing quite how to begin. The restraining order has complicated things, he finally said. We've been at Megan's for almost 2 weeks. The couch is killing my back, and her patience is wearing thin. Can you rent a place? I suggested, keeping my voice neutral, without accusation. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. With what money? My salary barely covers our basic bills. And Chloe, he hesitated, looking at his own hands. Chloe hasn't found a new job yet. So he still believed that lie. I took a sip of coffee, pondering how to proceed. Confronting him directly with everything I'd discovered might cause him to shut down completely. Ethan, if you're struggling financially, I can help you. Only you. He finally looked at me directly. What does that mean? Only me? It means I care about you, and I want to make sure you're okay, but I have conditions for that help. What conditions? His voice tensed. I want you to review your bank accounts. All of them. Your savings, your retirement, your credit card statements. Ethan frowned. Why? Because I have reason to believe you are not aware of your true financial situation. What are you talking about? Ethan put his cup down on the table with excessive force, spilling a little coffee. If this is some attempt to turn me against Chloe. It's not an attempt, I interrupted gently. It's a request based on facts I have discovered. Ethan, when was the last time you checked your retirement fund? A flash of doubt crossed his face. I don't know, a few months ago maybe? I have it all set up for automatic deposits. And withdrawals? Did you authorize any withdrawals recently? He went completely still. What withdrawals? I opened my purse and took out a sheet of paper, a statement from his retirement fund that Arthur had obtained. I placed it on the table, turned towards him. The document clearly showed 3 large withdrawals in the last 2 months. Ethan took the paper with trembling hands, his face losing all color as he read. This isn't possible. I never authorized this. There's more, I said gently, taking other documents from my purse. Credit card statements in his name with purchases he clearly hadn't made, including expensive jewelry and transfers to accounts we didn't recognize. Ethan scanned the papers. His breathing grew faster and faster. How did you get all this? I hired a private investigator. After Chloe assaulted me, I realized something was very wrong. You investigated my wife? His voice went up an octave, indignant. I investigated to protect you, I replied firmly. And it seems I was right to be concerned, Ethan. Chloe was fired 3 months ago. You have 5 credit cards maxed out, 2 of them in your name. She withdrew $25,000 from your retirement without your authorization. This is a crime. Ethan closed his eyes, taking several deep breaths. When he opened them, there was a mix of emotions in his gaze. Rage, confusion, fear, and finally, a glimmer of recognition. The bills. She always said she paid the bills, but money was always missing. I thought it was because my salary was low, that we weren't managing it well. She's stealing from you, son. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, there must be an explanation. Maybe she was desperate after losing her job. Maybe she didn't want to worry me. She must have planned to pay it back when she got a new job. Ethan, I said with all the gentleness I could muster, there's something else you need to see. I handed him the last document screenshots of Chloe's conversations with friends, where she talked about inheriting a house soon when the old hag finally croaks, and putting up with the old woman for a few more months until our financial situation is sorted. Ethan read the messages once, twice, 3 times, as if he couldn't comprehend the words in front of him. Then, I saw something in his face break. A tear ran down his cheek, followed by another and another. She always said that you didn't accept us because you were too traditional. That's why you treated us so coldly. Ethan, I never cared who you chose to love. I care about how that person treats you. He wiped his tears with a napkin. When we moved into your house, she said it would be temporary, just until we saved up money for our own place. But something always came up. An unexpected bill, an emergency. She said we were saving, but I never saw the money grow. I held his hand across the table. And the sweater? It's too hot to be wearing a turtleneck. Ethan paled and instinctively pulled the collar higher. It's nothing. Is it her? Has she been violent with you too? His eyes filled with tears again. Slowly, he pulled the collar down, revealing finger-shaped bruises on his neck, yellowish marks that looked to be fading. It was after the hearing, he whispered. She was furious about the restraining order. She said I should have testified for her, that I chose you over her. Ethan looked down. I'm so scared, Mom. The rage I felt in that moment was different from the cold indignation I experienced when Chloe threw the glass at me. It was a protective, primal fury, but I couldn't let it overwhelm me. Ethan needed clarity, not more emotional chaos. I want you to come home with me today, I said firmly. Right now, Chloe can't come near the house because of the restraining order. You'll be safe there. But my things? We'll send someone to get them later. The important thing is to get you out of that situation immediately. She's going to lose it when she finds out I'm gone. That's exactly why you need to leave, Ethan. This is a classic pattern of abuse. Andre remained silent for a long moment, looking at the documents scattered before us. Irrefutable proof of Chloe's financial and emotional betrayal. Finally, he nodded slightly. Okay, let's go home. On the way back, Ethan was silent, staring out the window. Only when I parked in the garage did he speak again. How did I let this happen? How did I not see it? Abuse rarely starts obviously, I replied, turning off the engine. It begins with small lies, small controls that gradually escalate. By the time you realize it, you're already caught in a web. We entered the house that had always been his too, the house where he grew up. Ethan stopped in the middle of the living room, looking around as if seeing the place for the first time. I'm going to get your room ready, I said, heading upstairs. Ethan's room was still just as it had always been. I had preserved it when he left for college and kept it up when he and Chloe moved into the guest room. It was a sanctuary from the past, a place where he could feel safe again. I changed the sheets, opened the windows to let in fresh air, and placed fresh flowers on the nightstand. Small gestures to tell him he was welcome, that this was his home. When I came downstairs, I found Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. He looked up as I entered. She's already called 12 times. Sent 20 messages asking where I am. You don't have to answer right now. I have to. If I don't answer, she'll show up here. Restraining order or not. Ethan typed a short message. I need some time to think. I'm safe. Please don't look for me today. Seconds later, the phone started ringing. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. Ethan declined the call with trembling hands and turned the device off. "What do I do now?" he asked, looking lost. "One step at a time," I replied, sitting beside him. "First, we need to protect your finances. Tomorrow, we change your bank passwords and notify the bank about the unauthorized transactions. Then, we see a lawyer to discuss your legal options." "Legal options," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "You mean divorce?" "Among other things. What she did, the unauthorized withdrawals, the credit cards in your name, those are financial crimes, Ethan. You can choose to press charges or not, but we need to stop her from continuing." Ethan nodded slowly. "I never thought I'd be in this situation. I always thought I'd recognize abuse if it happened to me. No one thinks it will happen to them. That's why abuse persists. It disguises itself, justifies itself, makes the victim doubt themselves." That night, I made dinner while Ethan took a long bath. We had a simple meal, mostly in silence, but it was a different silence than the one that had been between us in the preceding weeks. It wasn't a silence of anger or resentment, but of reflection, of reconnection. Before going to bed, Ethan hugged me, the first hug in weeks. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he whispered. "I would never give up," I replied, holding him a little tighter. That night, lying in my bed, I heard Ethan crying in the room next door. The sound broke my heart, but it also brought a strange relief. He was home, he was safe, and the crying was part of the healing. The next day, as planned, we went to the bank. Ethan canceled all the cards, changed passwords, and blocked access. We started the process of disputing the unauthorized withdrawals from his retirement. The manager, upon seeing the documents and hearing the explanation, strongly suggested that Ethan file a formal fraud report. "We'll think about it." That was all he could manage to say at the moment. In the afternoon, we met with a lawyer specializing in family law and domestic abuse cases. Rebecca was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a firm presence, exactly the kind of person we needed. "Based on what you've told me and the documents you've brought, we have a solid case for a fault-based divorce," Rebecca explained. "The financial abuse is well documented, and with the evidence of physical abuse, we can request a permanent protective order, not just the temporary one that's already in place." Ethan took a deep breath. "What if I don't want her to go to jail?" "I understand your hesitation," Rebecca replied gently. "Many victims of domestic abuse have conflicting feelings about criminally prosecuting their abusers. We can initially focus on the divorce and protecting your assets. The criminal charges can be a separate decision you make when you're ready." Leaving the office, Ethan seemed simultaneously exhausted and relieved. "It feels like I'm waking up from a nightmare," he commented as we drove home. "It's a process," I replied. "It won't be solved overnight." "I know, but at least now I'm walking in the right direction." That evening was interrupted by a noise at the front door around 10 o'clock. Furious pounding, the doorbell ringing repeatedly. Ethan and I looked at each other from the couch where we were watching a movie. "It's her," Ethan whispered, fear evident in his voice. "She can't get in," I assured him, grabbing the phone. "And she's violating the restraining order. I'm calling the police." The pounding continued, getting louder and louder, as I reported the situation to the 911 operator. "My daughter-in-law is violating a restraining order, trying to break into my house. We need a patrol car immediately." "Ethan," Chloe's voice came through the door. "I know you're in there. Open this door right now." Ethan shrank back on the couch, trembling. I went to him and held his hands. "It's okay. She can't get in. The police are on their way." "Huh." Chloe continued to scream, alternating between threats and pleas. The noise attracted the attention of the neighbors. I saw lights turn on in nearby houses, faces appearing in windows. When the patrol car arrived, 7 minutes later, Chloe was still on the porch, now kicking the door. The officers found her in flagrant violation of the restraining order. We watched through the window as they apprehended her. She kept looking at the house, screaming Ethan's name, even as they put her in the patrol car. "What's going to happen to her now?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. "She'll be arrested for violating the restraining order," I replied. "This has serious consequences." That night, Ethan slept in my room, just as he did when he was little and had nightmares. But this time, the nightmare was outside, being taken away. The next morning, I received a call from the detective in charge of the restraining order violation case. Chloe would be held in custody until her bail hearing, scheduled for the next day. Given the recent history of violence and the clear demonstration of instability, it's likely the judge will set strict conditions for bail, he explained. This could include an ankle monitor and constant supervision. I thanked him for the information and hung up, feeling a mix of relief and concern. Ethan was still sleeping. The events of the previous night had completely drained him. I made breakfast and left a note explaining where he could find me. I had a scheduled meeting with Arthur, my investigator friend, to discuss new findings. We met at his small office downtown. Arthur looked concerned when he greeted me. "Eleanor, we found more on Chloe, things you need to see." He opened a folder and spread documents across the table. There were police records from 2 different cities, both involving Chloe in cases of domestic violence and financial fraud. "She's done this before," Arthur explained. "In Denver, 5 years ago, and in Phoenix, 3 years ago. In both cases, she got involved with financially well-off individuals, moved into their homes, began manipulating their finances, and eventually became violent." I felt a chill. And what happened in those cases? In the first, the victim dropped the charges after Chloe made promises to change. In the second, there was an out-of-court settlement. The victim paid a significant amount for Chloe to get out of his life. "She's a serial predator," I murmured, scanning the documents. "And Ethan was just her latest victim." "Exactly. And there's something else." Arthur hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "We found evidence that Chloe recently researched life insurance and inheritance laws. Specifically, how to secure inheritance rights through marriage." A shiver went down my spine. The implications were clear and terrifying. "Do you think she?" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I can't say for certain she was planning anything specific," Arthur replied. "But the pattern is disturbing. She exhausted Ethan's financial resources. She knew you have a valuable house and other assets. The searches on inheritance, combined with the comments about the old hag croaking, paint a very unsettling picture." I left Arthur's office with the folder of documents weighing heavily in my hands and an even greater worry weighing on my chest. What had started as an assault at my dinner table had morphed into something far more sinister. When I returned home, Ethan was in the kitchen, making lunch. There was a new energy about him, still fragile but determined. "Where were you?" he asked, putting a pot of water on to boil. "Meeting with my investigator friend," I replied, placing the folder on the table. "Ethan, we need to talk." He looked at the folder, then at me, and turned off the stove. "More bad news? Important information. Please, sit down." I showed him the documents, carefully explaining Chloe's patterns of behavior in previous relationships. Ethan listened in silence, his face cycling through a series of emotions: shock, pain, anger, and finally, resolve. "So I wasn't special," he said at last. "I was just convenient." "You were a target," I corrected gently, "but that doesn't diminish who you are. Predators like Chloe are skilled at identifying good, trusting people, and manipulating them." Ethan ran a hand over his face, breathing deeply. "What do we do now?" "We need to talk to the lawyer and the police. These new documents strengthen both the divorce case and any potential criminal proceedings." "And her bail hearing is tomorrow?" "Yes, you don't have to attend." "But I want to. I need to look her in the eye knowing the truth." The determination in Ethan's voice surprised me. In just a few days, he had gone from a confused victim to a resolute survivor. That afternoon, Ethan and I laid out a detailed plan. First, he filed for a contested divorce, citing financial and physical abuse, accompanied by all the documents we had collected. Then, we filed formal reports for the financial crimes, the unauthorized use of his retirement account, and the fraudulent opening of credit cards. Our lawyer, Rebecca, was with us every step of the way, ensuring every document was flawless. "We want to build a case so solid that there's no room for escape," she explained. "The combination of the civil and criminal proceedings will create immense pressure." The next morning, we prepared for the bail hearing. Ethan chose a sober outfit, black slacks and a white shirt, the kind of clothes he'd wear for an important job interview. I opted for one of the suits I used to wear when I was still a judge, a subtle reminder to the court of who I was. The courthouse was relatively empty when we arrived, accompanied by Rebecca. We were directed to the courtroom, where we took discreet seats in the back. Ethan held my hand tightly, his fingers cold despite the day's warmth. When Chloe was brought in, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit and handcuffs, Ethan inhaled sharply. It was the first time he had seen her since the night of the break-in attempt. Chloe scanned the room, and her eyes locked onto us. For a moment, her expression softened when she saw Ethan. But then she noticed our intertwined hands, and her face contorted in rage. She said something to her lawyer, who glanced in our direction and shook his head. The judge entered, and the hearing began. The prosecutor presented the case. Flagrant violation of a restraining order, recent history of violence, risk of witness intimidation. Furthermore, Your Honor, he added, we have information that the defendant has a history of similar behavior in other jurisdictions, having been involved in prior cases of domestic violence and fraud in Denver and Phoenix. This was new to Chloe. She turned sharply to her lawyer, visibly shocked. She hadn't expected her past to catch up with her so quickly. The public defender tried to argue that Chloe had ties to the community, posed no real risk, and could await trial on release. The judge listened to the arguments with an impassive expression before announcing her decision. Considering the severity of the violation, the defendant's history, and the clear risk to the victims, I am ordering the defendant to be held in custody until trial, with a possible review in 30 days upon the presentation of a suitable supervision plan. Chloe let out a sound of protest, quickly silenced by her lawyer. As the officers approached to take her back to holding, she turned and looked directly at Ethan. Please, her voice sounded desperate. Ethan, don't let this happen. I love you. We can fix this. Ethan didn't look away. He stood his ground, looking directly into the eyes of the woman who had betrayed and abused him for months. He said nothing, just watched as Chloe was led out of the courtroom. In the hallway, after the hearing ended, Ethan finally let go of my hand and took a deep breath. I thought that would be harder, he confessed. Seeing her like that, hearing her beg. But I could only think about everything we found out the other people. The lies, the searches about inheritance. You were very strong, I said, feeling immense pride for my son. I don't feel strong, he answered honestly. I feel stupid for falling for it, for not seeing the signs. You're not stupid. You were manipulated by someone who has turned manipulation into an art form. On the way home, we stopped at a hardware store and bought paint. Ethan had decided to repaint his room, a symbolic act of a new beginning. He chose a soft, almost sky blue, the color of the sky, after a storm passes, as he described it. The following days brought an almost therapeutic routine. During the day, we handled legal matters meetings with the lawyer, visits to the bank to resolve financial issues, filling out forms for the criminal complaints. In the evenings, we painted Ethan's room, moved furniture, and renewed the space that had been his in childhood and adolescence, and would now be his sanctuary for healing. 3 months after our first meeting, Ethan received an invitation to speak at a state conference on domestic violence. He was nervous, questioning if he was ready to share his story on such a public stage. What if I'm not eloquent enough? He asked as we rehearsed his presentation in the living room. What if I freeze up in the middle and look like an amateur? Then you take a deep breath, take a sip of water, and continue, I replied. Remember, you're not there to impress anyone with perfect public speaking. You're there to share a truth that can help other people. On the day of the conference, I sat in the audience, watching my son walk onto the stage. He looked confident, centered. My name is Ethan Vance, he began. And today, I'm going to share with you how a broken wine glass saved my life. For 40 minutes, he kept the audience completely engaged, alternating between moments of raw vulnerability in describing his own abuse and sharp analysis of how the system often fails to recognize and address financial abuse. He concluded with a call for more education, better laws, and greater awareness. The standing ovation he received when he finished lasted for several minutes. As I watched, I felt tears in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a deep, overwhelming pride. My son had transformed his pain into purpose, his experience into wisdom. After the talk, as we were preparing to leave, Ethan was approached by an older, elegantly dressed woman with a badge identifying her as a representative of a philanthropic foundation. Mr. Vance, Your presentation was extraordinary, the woman said. I am impressed with the work you are doing. I would like to discuss the possibility of funding to expand your outreach. Andre looked at me, his eyes wide with surprise and hope. I nodded encouragingly. That would be wonderful, Andre replied. We have so many ideas for reaching more people, especially in rural areas where resources are scarce. They exchanged cards, agreeing to a meeting for the following week. As we walked to the parking lot, Andre seemed to be floating with excitement. Can you believe it? He exclaimed. Real funding to expand the project. We could create materials in different languages, develop an app for secure financial tracking, maybe even open a small, dedicated office. You deserve it, Andre, I replied. You've worked hard, and you're making a difference in so many people's lives. He stopped suddenly in the middle of the parking lot and hugged me. A strong hug, full of gratitude. None of this would have been possible without you, Mom. Without your strength that night, without your persistence afterward, without your support through this whole process. I returned the hug, feeling the peculiar sensation that only mothers know, pride and nostalgia simultaneously, watching your child grow beyond what you could have ever imagined. You always had that strength inside you, Ethan. You just needed to rediscover it. That night, as I drove home alone, Ethan had gone straight to his apartment. I reflected on the events of the past year. The assault with the glass, the police report, the discovery of the financial crimes, Chloe's arrest, Ethan's gradual recovery, and now this promising new chapter. It was impossible not to think about how one moment of violence, as terrible as it was, had triggered a series of events that brought not only justice but also healing and purpose. The broken glass had shattered more than crystal that night. It had shattered the power Chloe held over Ethan, the lies that had built their relationship, and the illusion that abuse only happens to other people. In its place, we had built something new and stronger, a renewed bond between mother and son, a shared purpose of transforming our own traumatic experience into hope for others. I parked in the garage, entered the house, and turned on the lights. The silence greeted me no longer. The oppressive silence of loneliness, or the tense silence that preceded that night's assault, but a peaceful silence of a life that had weathered the storm and found serenity on the other side. I made a cup of tea and sat on the patio, looking at the starry sky. I remembered the words of Ethan's therapist during one of our joint sessions. Sometimes we need to break completely to rebuild ourselves stronger. Like that crystal glass, our family had shattered for a moment. But what we built from the fragments was more resilient, more authentic, and infinitely more precious than what we had before. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments which part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll see you there.